Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classes of Mail. And this is a big episode for me because I'm finally going to talk about what happened at the Carrier Academy and how I got removed from the Carrier Academy. Got fired in disgrace. But first, I want to apologize to you guys for my last few episodes. I've been obviously enthusiastic about the M39, and I say that I'm enthusiastic, but in listening back to it, my voice just doesn't carry that enthusiasm. I really do feel it, but I'm worried that I'm starting to come off like the You Are the Current Resident podcast where the host says, "We're very happy to have this person. I can't wait to talk to him." And I don't want my podcast to be like that. So I like putting out 2 episodes a week, but it's probably not sustainable because what I really have to do to give you guys the product that you deserve and to give me a podcast that I'm proud of is to only record when I have the appropriate energy for it. And I hopefully have that appropriate energy today because this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. And it is about, I already covered this, getting removed from the Carrier Academy. So this story starts all the way back in April of 2022. That is 2 years ago. When the bosses at the Carrier Academy here in Las Vegas started overloading the classrooms. The manuals that govern the Carrier Academy say that they recommend a student-teacher ratio of 6-to-1, 6 students for every teacher. And if you have more than 6 students, then you put more than 1 teacher in to help make sure you maintain that ratio. And there's good practical reasons for why this is the case. Like when we're teaching new hires how to use their scanners, we need to be able to look at them while they're doing it and see like what they're seeing on their scanner. And with more than 6 students in a class, it gets really unmanageable for a single instructor to monitor all of that. Same goes for casing. You really need to watch people when they're casing. Make sure they're not putting the mail in backward. Make sure it's facing, the right way, put in the right cell. And sometimes you need more than 1 instructor for that. And then on the last day when we go out and practice delivering the mail, if you have more than 6 students, it just is extremely time consuming because you can only run 1 student at a time. 1 student has to go all the way through the walking course, then all the way through the driving course, then another student, and it's just extremely time consuming. So whoever came up with these guidelines for the Carrier Academy put a lot of thought into it, and this is guidelines that the union and management agreed on. And that's something that drives me nuts about the contract in general. I know I've talked about it, is that both parties agreed to this. And it's not like this is something that the union is just trying to foist on management. All parties came together and actually came to agreement, which, as we can see by these current contract negotiations, is not easy to do. And yet we managed to do it. So, it's reasonable to expect management to abide by these agreements. And so they weren't. They were putting more than 6 students in a class and expecting it to be taught by only 1 instructor. So I talked to my bosses in the training department, and they weren't interested in lowering that student-to-teacher ratio back down to 6-to-1 or smaller. So I finally filed a grievance. And at the time, I didn't know that there was a separate dispute resolution process for the Carrier Academy. It turns out there is. I would find that out about a year later. It's the alternative dispute resolution process where, at least for the academy, the business agent is supposed to get together with some higher up from labor on the management side, and they're supposed to just talk it out, essentially, and come to an agreement. I didn't know that at the time, so I just filed a grievance that, hey, the manuals say 6-to-1 and you're going over 6-to-1, so here's my grievance. Oh, by the way, you're going to hear paper for this episode because there were just too many things for me to put in an organized way on my tablet. And man, I've gotten really spoiled by using that tablet. It's so easy to just scroll and read off of it. I could put it whatever height I want, but today it's paper. All right, so anyway, I file my grievance, and it gets sustained. and management agrees to follow the recommended student-to-teacher ratio. And that was back in May of 2022. That grievance actually settled on May 9th of 2022. Local Agreement 702-22C. I hang my hat on that grievance. So we fast forward about a year later to mid-May of 2023, which is now like a year ago. And once again, the training department starts training or scheduling classes that go beyond the agreed upon student-teacher ratio. And this really bothers me. So I brought it to the attention of the person at training who does the scheduling and said, hey, this is too many. This is, we need to get it back down to 6-1. And the person who I brought it to, it turns out is not a supervisor. It's just a worker in the department just like me, but I was always under the impression they were my supervisor. I guess that's neither here nor there. I mean, that person certainly behaves like my supervisor because they make my schedule, they tell me when I'm supposed to come in, I give my supply request to that person and so on, but regardless, not really my supervisor. So anyway, I bring my complaint to that person about these class sizes, and that person tells me, tough shit, essentially, we're going to go forward with the larger class sizes. And I resist the change, and he says, well, look, I'm just a lackey like you. You're going to have to take it up with the director of training. I'm going to try not to use people's names unless it's completely obvious. It probably doesn't make any difference, but whatever. Just bear with me. So I do. I take it up with the person who runs the training department, that higher level of management. And before I did that, I'm talking to this person who's at my level, the person who does the scheduling, and he tells me that there was a policy change and that larger class sizes are now permitted because there's this change in the way the academy is run. And I'd certainly never heard of such a change, but, I don't know. I'm not privy to that stuff. And then he also tells me that some of the things that I had been doing in the Carrier Academy to make it more enriching for my students were inappropriate. For example, I take students on field trips as often as I can. Like right near our Carrier Academy classroom is where all the UBM, the undeliverable bulk business mail, gets processed for the entire area. And it all goes through there and then gets dumped into the shipping container where it goes off to the bulk recycler. So I would take my Academy students in there so that we could look at actual pieces of mail, and we'd look for pieces that don't belong, like first-class mail, pieces with ancillary service endorsement, periodicals, stuff like that. And it was this really good hands-on teachable moment. And anyway, he told me, the person who's at my level in training told me that was inappropriate. And he also told me that it was inappropriate to show photos from my own personal experience. I had all these photos of this is a house where I delivered to where I had a dog incident. This is what happened. This is how I protected myself. This is what you want to do in that situation. This is a piece of mail that I had that would, I don't know, whatever the pictures were. It was a lot of dog stuff. It was a lot of safety things and stuff that just brought the material to life and personalized it. And he told me that was inappropriate as well, and I just need to stick to only the materials that are provided with the class. And all of these things, he says, are coming out of the training manual. So because of the type of personality I have, I want to get my hands on that manual and see what all these policies are. So I call the director of training here in Las Vegas and ask to see the manual. I want to see it for myself, where all these restrictions are coming from, where the new policy is coming from that shows that you can have more than 6 students to 1, despite the grievance that I won. And the training guy, the director, agrees to send me the manual. He'll send it to me via interoffice mail. So I wait a couple of days, and I don't know if you've ever dealt with management, but I had a feeling that the chances of me getting this manual were very close to 0. So I ask online in various, there's a Carrier Academy Facebook group. Hey, do any of you guys have this manual? And I get my hands on the manual. And as far as I can tell, it is the most up-to-date manual. And I read through this manual. If you want the manual number, I can give it to you. Send me an email at classesofmail.com or classesofmail@gmail.com. So I read through this manual, And I read through another document called the Carrier Academy Site Readiness Guide, which talks about how the academy is supposed to be set up. And of course, the manual that the director was supposed to send me never came. Shocker. So anyway, I looked through this stuff, and I find a bunch of things that we're not doing that are supposed to be done. I find all these different policies, these procedures, these materials, where we're falling short of giving the best possible learning environment to our students. And of course, nowhere in there does it say that you can go more than 6 to 1. In fact, it specifically says in multiple places that you should maintain a ratio of 6 to 1. And so in addition to finding all of these things about, well, I'm going to get into what the whole list was of deficiencies that I found, but the biggest thing that I found, and I felt like a real dum-dum when I saw it, is that the teachers of the Carrier Academy are supposed to get a paid prep period. A preparatory period to get the classroom ready for when the students come in, to prepare your materials, to get everything all laid out, stuff like that, to meet the students when they come in, to make sure the computer's ready, all that stuff. And it says in this manual that it's anywhere from 1 to 4 hours of time that you're supposed to get before each class. Now, up until this point, me and the other academy instructors, were just doing the best we could, getting the stuff set up as best we could, and generally just coming in early, maybe as much as a half hour early, off the clock like idiots, to meet the students and set up the classroom. And that was the status quo, is just you come in early and get that stuff done. And we had to come in early because we have to meet the students as they come in and walk them down to the classroom and be there. And so this is all just standard. And again, I feel like a big dum-dum because I would stand in front of the class and talk about don't work off the clock, and then I'm doing that in the classroom. I'm working off the clock. But I was dedicated to giving my students the best classroom experience that I could, and the things had to be done, and so this was just accepted. It was treated as standard procedure. So I bring this up. Once I get these manuals, then I start bringing this up to the person who is my equal, who does my scheduling, and say, hey, it turns out this manual says I'm supposed to get a paid prep period, so let's make that happen. And of course he says no. And I say, well, it's called for in the manual, and that is a non-starter, and he says, well, look, I don't have the authority to change any of this stuff, which I'm sure is true. And by the way, all of these early interactions, I'm just going off memory. A lot of this was done by text message, but I dropped my phone into a jacuzzi and it broke my phone, and I don't have those messages anymore. So, these things happen. So if the details aren't exactly right, it's not super important. It's the spirit of what happened. So anyway, he says, look, if you want to press for this, and I did, I wanted to press for it because I could immediately see the value of, oh my God, if I could set this classroom up and have this prep time, I always tell my students, when you first start casing a new route, you want to case the bundled mail first because it's in order, and it really helps you to familiarize yourself with the streets on the route. And I'm like, dude, what if I could come in and have 16 flats in a bundle in order that they could case first? That would be awesome. That would be so helpful. It would make it easier to find the streets. It would be faced so that the mail's they're gonna get used to putting the mail in the right way. And that would be great, and so there's a lot of stuff like this. So anyway, my compatriot says, well, you're going to have to take this to the director. And so I do. I take it to the director, and I'm fairly adamant that I want this prep time. It's called for in the manuals, and I'm not doing this stuff for free anymore. I've been doing it for free for a long time, and I ain't doing it for free anymore. And before I did this, my counterpart in training warned me against making an issue of the shortcomings in the academy. And he said, and this I definitely remember, that the director, that I should be careful because that person is a stickler for compliance. And this was definitely like a thinly veiled threat. That, dude, if you try to make waves and try to tell him what to do, then you're going to wind up paying the price. And it turned out he was right. I did wind up paying the price for it. But in my head, I'm thinking, oh, if he's a stickler for compliance, that's perfect. Because that's what I'm looking for, is compliance to these manuals. The manuals say you're supposed to do it this way, and that's the way we should be doing it. But of course, what he meant was that I could expect retaliation, and he was exactly right. That's exactly what I got. Good times. So anyway, the manuals are on my side, so I take the issue to this director, and, I show him that it's in the manuals, and I talk about that I had reached out on that Carrier Academy Facebook page. I asked instructors around the country, hey, do you get this paid prep period that's provided for in the manuals? And every single one of them said, yeah, of course we do. How else would you get that stuff done? Yes, we get a paid prep period. So I present all of this to the director, and he agrees. He says, okay, you can come in on Monday, and you'll start your class 2 hours early. Great. So I show up. It's May 22nd, 2023. I show up at the Carrier Academy at 05:30. And immediately I get to work, and I'm excited. Like it's early, and I'm tired, but I get the coffee going, and I'm ready to set this class up for success. It is going to rock. And the way we do things here is one teacher teaches the entire class. Like we don't really trade off. So I'm going to be there all 4 days, and this is going to be the most kick-ass Carrier Academy I have ever taught. So I get in there. I get started. The first thing I do, to my recollection, is start organizing the flats into the bundles like I talked about. And about 2 minutes after I get there, the director comes walking in, which is very unusual. It's unusual for a couple of reasons. First, he doesn't get to work that early, so he came in early special just to come visit me. Second, he has essentially never come in to see what I'm doing. In fact, the entire time that I had been teaching under his direction at the academy, he'd probably come into the classroom 5 times and never really had anything to say. I would be surprised if we said more than 30 words to each other over the combined 6 years or so that I was at the academy, or however long he was my boss there. There was just never any interaction. Anything that I needed from management, I would go through my counterpart, which is part of the reason I thought that dude was actually my supervisor. But here he is. He comes strolling into the classroom. And of course, he's there to check up on me. He's incredulous that I could actually need this prep period or that I would do anything productive with it. And so he tells me that he wants a full accounting of everything that I do during that 2 hours. And as far as I'm concerned, dude, great. I am happy to give you this list because this is going to be like a template going forward of all the things that teachers should do to get ready for the class. And so I used that full 2 hours, and really I needed more than that. Part of it was because the classroom was just disorganized. We have 5 different instructors. People put stuff in different places. And so I spent some of the time just labeling things and making sure everything was organized. But moral of the story is I used that full 2 hours easily. And then later in the day, I give him my list, and he's like, oh, cool, thank you for this. This is going to be really helpful. I think he was blowing smoke up my ass, but I can't prove it. Well, except for what happened later. So anyway, the next day, he agrees to give me 1 hour prep period. Awesome. So I come in, I make the most of it. I don't see him, and the class. Guys, these classes are going so well because of everything I can set up in advance. Everything is right where I need it. It just goes smoothly. I can teach everything I want. I don't have to search for stuff. I don't have to waste a bunch of time. It's awesome. It's great. This is the academy that I always wanted, minus some supplies and stuff that are also called for in the manuals, but that's its own issue. For my own part as a teacher, I feel like I'm teaching my best teach. Living my best life, but for teaching. It's great. And I love teaching. I mean, obviously, right? That's why I do this podcast. Of course I love it. My heart's in it. And I want to be the best teacher I can be, and I want to give the best classroom I can give and give these students the best chance for success. So that's Tuesday, the 23rd, day 2. Day 3, the 24th. My counterpart in training tells me that I need to show up again an hour early, but this time, instead of going directly to the classroom and getting started, I need to go to the director's office for a meeting. So, all right, cool. This is great. I come ready with my list of everything that I've been doing and my list of things going forward that are going to need to be addressed to get us in line with these manuals. And I'm ready. I show up at his office a few minutes early, and the dude no-shows. He just does not show up, is not there. And so at 6:45, I get a text message from my counterpart in training telling me that he's not going to be able to make it to the director won't be able to make it to the meeting. Okay, so I go back to the classroom and immediately start my prep work for the day. These 3 days were fantastic. Things went so well. I was really doing a great job for these students, if I do say so myself. And, having this opportunity to teach the class the way it's meant to be taught was invigorating. It was like an awakening, like, oh, dude, finally, the future looks bright here at the Carrier Academy. This is going to be fantastic. Imagine how much good stuff we can do in here. And late in the morning, I get a call from a administrative assistant or something in the training department telling me that after the class ends for the day, I need to come to her office. So, okay, no problem. Class ends at 4 p.m. at 1600 and say goodbye to everybody. And I head up to her office and she tells me to close the door. That is never a good sign. And I sit down and she asks me, she's reading from something on her computer, and she asked me if I have a podcast. And I say yes, and I'm excited about it. Yeah, I have this podcast. It's great. It's called Class as a Male, and it goes over a lot of the stuff we talk about at the Carrier Academy. It's great. And she slows me down and tells me from this email that I am fired from the Carrier Academy effective immediately, because my podcast violates the U.S. Postal Service's social media policy. And I should report back to my station tomorrow. Somebody else will finish the class for me. And I'm shocked, right? I don't think that this podcast violates the social media policy. And immediately, my thoughts are retaliation. This is the director of the department, of the training department, just doesn't like me telling him, that he should do what's in the manuals, and so he's just getting rid of me. So I start peppering her with questions, like I asked her, well, specifically, in what way does my podcast violate the social media policy? She doesn't know. She's just the messenger. And I asked her, well, does it say that I need to take the podcast down? And no, it does not say that. And this will actually be important later, because I asked, do I need to take the podcast down? And no, I was not told to take the podcast down. Interestingly, in addition to being a Carrier Academy instructor, I was also an on-the-job instructor, which happens at my station. The Carrier Academy is at the central location. It's at our P&DC here in Las Vegas. And that's under the direct supervision or maybe indirect supervision of that director of training. But at the station, it's just handled at the station. So I asked, well, am I still an on-the-job instructor? And she kind of looked through the papers and she, well, it doesn't say anything about that in here. So yeah, I guess you are. So, well, that's odd that I'm still fit to teach in the station, but not fit to teach in the academy. How does that work? And of course, she has no idea. So asking her, continuing to pepper her with questions isn't going to be fair, and she's not going to be able to answer these questions. So that's fine. So I just let it go, and she did tell me before I left that I should expect to be on the ass end of an investigative interview at some point that will go over all of these violations. So, oh, great. I got that to look forward to. So I leave her office, and I immediately go down to branch 2502 of the NALC, and I talk to the president and vice president of our union and tell them what just happened. And they pull out the social media policy. It's in the ELM, if I remember right. Or maybe it's in the AMS, the administrative manual, or ASM, administrative, whatever. It's in some manual, right? Some manual that I don't have access to normally. So they pull it up, and we read through it all together, and for the life of us, we cannot find a violation. And so that's where it sits. And okay, I guess this process is going to have to run its course, and I'm going to have to eventually have my investigative interview, and the post office is going to have to decide whether they want to issue discipline. But in a way, they've already issued discipline because I've been fired from the Carrier Academy without due process. They just unilaterally made this decision to get rid of me, and that was that, right? Does his podcast violate the social media policy? Well, who cares? Just get rid of him. And they would never be able, well, spoiler alert, they will never be able to articulate a way in which my podcast violates the social media policy, because it fucking doesn't. Okay, so that's May. So then I have some vacation, and I come back, and I'm working at my station now in mid-June. I've been doing on-the-job instruction there, and I'm just waiting for this all to settle out. And in the meantime, I read through all the academy manuals, I get all my information squared away, and I also see from this M document that established the Carrier Academy, I think it's M01879, it'll come up later, that disputes in the Carrier Academy are supposed to be settled through the alternative dispute resolution process, which is where somebody from the national business agent, the national business agent themselves or their designee meets with somebody from management or their designee, and they just hammer this stuff out. And it should just be as simple like sit down and talk about it, and then boom, it's settled, right? It's supposed to be a lot simpler than going through the whole grievance process. So today is my day of investigative interview. June 15th, 2023, the day before my birthday, incidentally. And I get brought in for an investigative interview, and much to my surprise, and I'd been hearing scuttlebutt that this has gotten attention all the way up in D.C., and like the post office has lawyers looking at it, and it's like this big, big deal. And I don't want to take my podcast down. Right? I did stop publishing episodes, and if you go back and look at the early episodes, there's like a month gap or a month and a half gap where I'm waiting for all this to settle out, because I, in good faith, like, hey, until this issue is resolved, okay, I'm at least going to stop making episodes, but I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, and I don't want to take it down. And as I'm talking to my union officials about it, at the local level, they feel like I'm just causing problems, that I'm making waves. And they're right about that to a certain extent. Like, the whole idea of I got my hands on this manual and I want management to do things the right way, to do things by the book, because it's a disservice to our students to do otherwise. That's me making waves and overstepping and being like pushy. And it's true. I am being pushy. I want the best environment for my students, and the manuals that the union and management agreed on call for that. And management's not doing it. So that's what the union is for, isn't it? To hold management accountable and to have them do the right thing. I think that's what the union is for. And not doing that is a disservice to our new hires. And they're the ones who need the union's help most. They're in the most vulnerable position. And gosh, I sure would like to get them started on the right foot. But it doesn't seem that my local union sees it that way, or at least it's not worth the trouble. And they actually asked me, is it worth all of this fight? Is it worth, like, what if you take a stand on your podcast and they wind up firing you over your podcast? Right now you haven't really lost anything, they tell me. You're not out any money. I agree. I'm not. I just can't teach at the Carrier Academy anymore. Do you really want to press this issue? Yeah, I do. And if I'm wrong, okay, then I'm wrong. I'll take the podcast down. I'll, apologize, whatever needs to be done. But I really don't think I'm wrong. And I think that what I'm doing actually has value and needs to be done. And now that we're like 50 episodes or 40 episodes in or whatever, I think that's borne out. That, yeah, it does have value and it does need to be done. So with all this in my head, I go in for my investigative interview. And it is conducted, much to my surprise, by a new supervisor at my station, somebody who's new to supervision in general. The task somehow fell to him to do my investigative interview. And so it's not like he came up with these questions. This was just handed to him from who knows where. And on that note, on the note of who knows where, I never got to face my accuser. I never actually knew who brought this charge up against me. You know, I assume that it was the director of training here locally, and, that it was just genuine retaliation. And there are a number of things that point to that I'll get to a little bit later, including some inside information that I'll talk about a little bit later. But there was never any stamp on it that says this comes from so-and-so. So anyway, my supervisor gets these questions for the investigative interview. I go in there with my steward, Dave Nizowitz, buddy. I talked about him in my self-indulgent episode as essentially my first friend and mentor at the post office way back when I first got hired. So he comes in as my steward, and we go through these questions. So I have the transcript here. Let me grab it. There you go. There's some more paper. And we're going to go through it. This is an investigative interview conducted at 9:08 a.m. I went from 9:08 to 9:32, so 25 minutes. And it was conducted by so-and-so supervisor, new supervisor, with me as the subject and Dave as my union rep. This is on June 15th. So here we go. This is what the supervisor says. I'm going to bring back the accent for the supervisor, but I can't do the Southern gentleman for it. So let's see. What's a good accent? I'll do a high-pitched accent. I guess that's something. At least it's something I can do. Please be aware that this... No, that's not going to work. Let's see. Fuck it. I'll just read it. Please be aware that this is an investigative interview that may or may not result in corrective action, up to and including removal from the Postal Service. You have a right to representation during this process, under the terms and conditions of the Weingarten rights. You are required to cooperate in an official investigation and to answer all questions truthfully. And then we get to the first question. Question. How long have you been an on-the-job instructor for the United States Postal Service? Answer. I think around 5 years. Question. Do you have a podcast channel? Answer. I do. Question. Did you create an educational session on your podcast called Classes of Mail? Answer. I did. Question. Do you create a class called PARS, CFS, and Move Left No Address? Answer. I believe that was one of the episodes. Question. Do you create a class called Carrier Endorsements? Stepping out here for a second, I don't know why it says, do you create a class? I'm sure they mean, did you create a class? But, far be it from, we shouldn't expect management to write clearly. So anyway, do you create a class called Carrier Endorsements? Answer, that was another episode. Question, do you create a class called the 3999? Answer, no. So here, what management means to ask is, did you have an episode that was called the 3996? Which I did. I did have an episode called the 3996. But there's a few things that I've learned, even back then, before I got experienced as a steward. Ask the question, answer the question that is asked. Don't do anything to help management make their case. And don't volunteer information unless it's exculpatory, unless it's going to help clear my name. So when they ask me, do you create a class called the 3999, the only thing I say to that is no. There you go. Do you create a class? Next question. Do you create a class called UBBM Undeliverable Bulk Business Mail? Answer. I believe so. I wasn't actually sure if that was the title of the episode, but it was academic. These are the episodes. I only had a few at the time. Question. As an OJI, do you teach new hires the importance of mail security? Answer. Yes. And this question kind of threw me for a loop because we're here to talk about the podcast and about my job as a Carrier Academy instructor. And I wound up burning a lot of mental calories thinking about this question. Why would they ask me about the security of the mail? Why would they ask me if I'm doing that as an OJI? What is this about? How is this some weird angle that they're going to take? That some sideways thing about how in the mail security that I have no idea. Well, now that it's all settled out and it's been more than a year since this has happened, or it's been about a year since this has happened, I think they just threw it in. I think there was no real logic behind it, which is really not surprising coming from management. But that was the question. As an OJI, do you teach new hires the importance of mail security? Yes. Okay. Question. Are you aware, per the Administrative Support Manual, ASM, employees may not speak for or act on behalf of the Postal Service? Answer. I've never seen or heard of the ASM. Was I issued the ASM? Or was I given the ASM? And at this point, the supervisor says, I'm the one asking the questions here. You're not allowed to ask questions. And I said, well, I'm going to ask anyway. And if you don't answer, then I want my union steward to put down that you didn't answer the question. And the reality is that in looking up the social media policy for myself to see if I violated anything, I did. It's in the ASM. And so I had looked at that point, but I still had never been issued an ASM and would have never heard of it except for doing my own digging to see if I had violated anything. So on the transcript here, it says that I've never seen or heard of the ASM. Was I given the ASM? And the supervisor did answer, no idea. And this is part of what's going to be my active defense if I'm ever given the chance to mount an active defense, because one of the primary defenses to discipline is there a rule, and was the employee reasonably aware of that rule? Well, if the rule is in the ASM and I've never seen an ASM before, how the hell am I supposed to know that rule? Right? And so that's a defense to discipline. You have to remember, and I know I've talked about this in other episodes, this investigative interview is your chance to mount a positive defense. It's your day in court, essentially, to speak for yourself. And that's what I was doing here with this question. All right, next question. Are you aware that employees using Postal Service information for the purpose of participating in social media may be subject to the let me start this over. It's a confusing question anyway. Are you aware that employees using Postal Service information for the purpose of participating in social media may subject the Postal Service to legal and information security risks? And I had a hard time understanding that question even when it was asked of me. And so my answer is, that's above my understanding. I don't think I've said anything inappropriate or untrue. Question. Are you aware by creating a podcast to share Postal Service information is accessible by anyone with a browser, not just USPS employees? Answer. Yes. Yeah, there's no secrecy here, and it's something that my only answer was yes. It's something that I had thought about, like I'm going to be reading from these Postal Service documents, like reading the M39. Is that copyrighted? Am I doing some sort of copyright infringement by reading this stuff? But the fact is, it's all readily available on the internet. You can download it from anywhere. There's 100 different sites where all this stuff can be found, including the post office's own sites, where you don't have to log in or provide any credential to see this stuff. It's all publicly available. And so I'm not really worried about that aspect of it. But at this point, I have no idea what argument management is actually going to make. Like, I know in the policy, in the social media policy, I can't claim to speak for the Postal Service. No problem. I don't do that. And in the social media policy, I can't use the post office's trademarks to make money. And that actually brings us to the next question. Oh no, the next two questions are about the things that are actually concerns for violation. So all this is just preamble. And then we finally get down to the actual questions where there could be a potential violation. And this is what the investigative interview is supposed to be. It's supposed to be fact-finding. Hey, there could be this problem here. Let's find out. Let's ask. And that's what happens in these next two questions. These might be the only two honest questions in the entire interview. Question. When creating your podcast called Classes of Mail, were you transparent about your role at the Postal Service and disclose that your training views are your own and do not necessarily represent the views of the Postal Service? Now, that's a good question. And if I answer it wrong, I'm definitely going to be in trouble. But I answer it truthfully. Here's my answer. It is written in the podcast description. Additionally, I don't believe I claim to speak on behalf of the U.S. P.S. My views are inherently my own. And so that's the truth, right? It says, if you look at my podcast description, it says I don't speak for the post office and that my views are my own. I'm not claiming to speak for the post office in any official capacity. So I'm covered, as far as I'm concerned, from that complaint. All right, now the next question. Question. Are podcasters compensated based on how many downloads received per episode? Okay, so before I give my answer, right, I'm thinking about this before I answer. The question as asked, are podcasters compensated? The answer to that is yes. Some podcasters are compensated. But if I just say yes, they're going to misinterpret that as, oh, you're making money by talking about the post office. Now we got you. And so I can't just say yes. I have to say what I think is going to defend me. And so my answer is, truthfully, my answer is maybe some are, but I am not. I actually have to pay to host this podcast, which is still true. I think I pay like $15 or $25 a month to rss.com to host this podcast. Worth every penny, guys. Thanks for listening. All right, so that's that question. The next question. Are you aware it is an ethic violation for postal employees to teach and receive compensation that relates to the employee's postal duties? So with this question, I guess maybe they're trying to accuse me of, using my station at the post office, my position, to try to make money. But the way it's worded, are you aware that it's an ethic violation for postal employees to teach and receive compensation that relates to the employee's postal duties? Well, I'm an on-the-job instructor. That's something I do all the time. I teach related to my postal duties, and I receive compensation. So that's the answer I decide to give. My answer is I would need clarification. I got paid on Monday to teach a new CCA. I was paid by the post office. All right, and then the final question is, do you have anything to add? And boy, do I have something to add. All right, so here's what I say. I am unaware of any specific policy that I have allegedly violated. You mentioned the ASM. What part of that did I violate? And the supervisor has no answer. How am I supposed to know I violated it if I can't even be told the rule or what I said to allegedly break the rule? I believe the transcript is cut off here, so I'm going to have to try to piece this together. I believe there was no harm done to the post office by what I am teaching in the podcast. This is training the carriers desperately need. All right, and then finally, the supervisor decides to add his own questions. And I don't know what his motivation was in adding these questions, but they wound up helping me so much. So, first question, have you been spoken to about your podcast? Maybe he's thinking that somebody already told me that it's a problem and I need to take it down, and I'm not doing so in defiance of what the post office is telling me. So that's what he asked. Have you been spoken to about your podcast? Answer. The only previous time it was mentioned to me in my management was when it was used as an excuse to remove me from the Carrier Academy. At that time, just like this time, management was unable to specify what specific rule I allegedly violated and in what way. So that moves to the next question. And guys, this is the hinge pin of this interview. It's so beautiful. He asks me, did they instruct you to remove the podcast? Now, the supervisor has no idea whether I've been told to take it down or not. But if he's following that line of thinking, post office already told him to take it down. It's still up. What is this guy doing? He's defying these orders. And so he probably thinks he's got me dead to rights. But when I hear this question, did they instruct you to remove the podcast? I know that the exact opposite is true. I've got them dead to rights. And I start laughing. And I tell my union steward, I can't believe I didn't mention this already. I feel so dumb for not already bringing this up. Thank you, supervisor, for asking me this question, because now I can actually say, and my answer is absolutely not. And I specifically asked, do I need to remove the podcast? And no. So that's the end of the answer, but never was I told to take the podcast down. Now, there's some gray area where, they didn't tell me I could keep it up, but they didn't tell me to take it down either. And all I can do is ask. So that's that. All right. And then we go back to, I have an additional statement at the end of this where I say, I am perfectly happy to comply with any rules the post office has. I just need to be aware of them. Even now, as discipline is being threatened, I am still not aware of any specific rule I am violating. Show me the rule, show me how I allegedly violated it, and I will be happy to correct any infraction. It's crazy to me that I was never given the opportunity to correct this alleged infraction before the post office jumped to the threat of discipline. And thus ends the investigative interview. And that's the case, right? Not only did they jump to the threat of discipline, they actually disciplined me by removing me from the Carrier Academy without any due process. The due process came 3 weeks later, where they finally did their investigative interview. But at that point, I'd been fired from the academy for 3 weeks, fired in disgrace for 3 weeks. So that's my investigative interview on June 15th, and now it's time to wait to see what's the post office going to do. And in that waiting time, I reread that investigative interview so many times. Well, what angle can they take? What position are they going to have? What are they driving at here? And those two questions about, are you speaking for the post office and are you making money? Those are the big ones, and I know I answered those correctly. So what's the deal? And then in the meantime, I know I have this alternative dispute resolution process to get me back in, but I can't really start that, at least from my perspective, until I know whether I did something wrong. Because if the post office is justified, if I did violate the social media policy and that's cause to remove me, then in my opinion, I have no cause to go through this dispute resolution because I was in the wrong. Does the punishment fit the crime? That's its own debate. But okay, I got to let this settle out. That's my position on it. So now we get to July 16th. I wait a month to see if the post office is going to issue discipline, and they never do. Discipline does not come, if you don't count getting fired. So I figured, all right, they must have decided against issuing discipline. They must have decided that my podcast is okay, so now it's time for me to get my job back. So I call the director of training here in Las Vegas, and I say, no, there's nobody home, so I leave him a message. And I say, hey, good news. The post office has decided not to issue discipline over my podcast. I've been cleared of any wrongdoing, and so we're good to go. You can get me back on the schedule. And that's essentially exactly what I say and how I say it. And I know, at this point, again, I'm still really confident this is just retaliation, and retaliation from him specifically, but it didn't come through. It didn't stick. And so I should be back on the schedule at the Carrier Academy. So the next day, I get a phone call, not from him, but from a human resources person here in Las Vegas who works for the post office. They're a human resources person. In response to me trying to get back in at the Carrier Academy. And she tells me that I can't come back to the Carrier Academy because I'm guilty of violating the social media policy. And I said, well, the post office did their investigation and they didn't find any wrongdoing. So no, I'm not guilty of violating the social media policy. And she says, it doesn't matter, I'm guilty anyway, and that I can't come back to the post office if I continue to put out my podcast. And so we go back and forth on this a number of times, and if you've ever dealt with management, at least this person doesn't really know what she's talking about. She's just holding the company line. And I've heard from labor attorneys that human resources is not your friend. If you're an employee, human resources is there essentially to make sure you don't sue your employer. They don't work for you as the employee, they work for the employer. And that is definitely what's going on here. She is firmly in the camp of management, and even if she doesn't have a leg to stand on, she's going to stand there anyway. And that's what goes on. And so we go back and forth a few times. Look, they didn't issue discipline. And she tells me, well, there's another investigative interview coming. And of course that never came. And I asked her, do I need to take down my podcast? And she was careful to stop short of telling me to take it down, right? Whatever authority she thought she had, I think she knew that she couldn't actually tell me to take it down because she works for the government. She works for the USPS, which is a government agency. And if the government tells me not to publish, then now that becomes a First Amendment issue. And I think she at least knows enough to steer clear of that. But once again, this just adds fuel to, I asked, do I need to take this down? And I was not told to take it down. So, moving on. So at one point, she actually offered me a quid pro quo with my podcast, telling me that if I take my podcast down, that she'll put me back on the schedule at the Academy. That as long as I take the podcast down, I'm back in the Academy. And it was tempting because I really love teaching. But I also really felt like I was right. And so I decided to turn the tables on her. And I said, I'll tell you what, I got a counteroffer for you. If you can actually show me where I violated the social media policy, I'll take the podcast down. I don't need a quid pro quo. You can leave me out of the Academy. If you just show me where the podcast violates the policy, I'll take it down. No quid pro quo needed. And she says, okay, that she will show me. And, we look at the social media policy and she can't find any violation because there isn't one. And she hems and haws a little bit and then says, I should know where, she tells me that I should know what the violation is. I'm like, well, I don't, and I've read it. And she's like, oh, well, you think you're so smart. You read the whole thing. I guess you know better. You should know where the violation is. And I said, well, yeah, I have read it, but I don't see a violation. And she's, well, if you can't figure that out, maybe you're not smart enough to be teaching in the Carrier Academy. I mean, this is what I'm up against. And I said, look, it's only a paragraph long. Most of the social media policy is about how official USPS representatives who run their Facebook account are supposed to manage it. There's only one little section that applies to regular employees. I said, look, the thing's not that long. Just tell me which part of it I'm violating. She said, well, I don't have time for this now. So she wound up agreeing to send me an email where she would actually highlight the specific part of the social media policy that I violated. And so we get off the phone, and I don't have a means to record that phone call, but what I did instead was I immediately sent her an email going over what we talked about, going over her agreement to send me the part of the social media policy that I violated, because I want to memorialize all the things that we talked about. And she never responded. Shocker. So I send another email a couple days later. She doesn't respond to that. And she never did tell me what part of the social media policy I violated, because I didn't fucking violate any part of the social media policy. But that did not stop her from standing firm and not putting me back in the Carrier Academy. So through this whole process, I asked again and again of management, show me the violation, and they never could. So that is that. After I gave her a few days to respond, that's when I finally contacted the National Business Agent to start the alternative dispute resolution process. And that brings us on to the next stage of our saga. Let me grab that paper. There we go. Okay. Next. So now we get to July of 2023. And I bring my case to the business agent for Region 1. It is Keisha Lewis. When podcast or the discipline's not issued, I go through human resources, and I'm still not back in, so now it's time to go to the business agent. And I wasn't sure if I had a case or not. if my podcast was in violation, then yeah, maybe it's legitimate. So I call up the business agent's office. I get their phone number. I call them up, and they put me through to an assistant, a regional assistant. And I talk to him. I tell him about my case, about my issue, and he's really sympathetic. And he sounds like a good dude, and he's saying all the right things, and he feels like I have a case. And so he takes down all my information. So yeah, you've definitely been wronged. And he's going to pass it along to Keisha Lewis. And it's worth noting, I'll just get this out of the way right in the beginning, that in the rest of this entire process that would drag on for another, 10 months, never did I actually speak to Keisha Lewis. It was all handled through this assistant, which is okay. I don't know what satisfaction I would have got from actually talking to the business agent, but I feel like it would have helped, if she would have been present for this thing that she's specifically tasked with. And so we'll get to that. So that's in July. In August of 2023, I send along some updates and some additional information to the assistant. And the assistant, again, is being helpful. He's supportive. He's saying the right things. I feel like I really have an advocate in this assistant. But the problem is, he's waiting for Keisha Lewis to move forward with this case. And this alternative dispute resolution, it should just be a matter of Miss Lewis talking to somebody from management, and they're like, yeah, you don't really have a leg to stand on here, and then boom, I'm back in the academy. This should be a process that takes 20 minutes. And now they've had my case for a month, and there's been no movement at all. So I message, I call the assistant a few times. I'm trying not to be a pest. I know I have a tendency to be a pest, and I feel strongly about this. I feel like I'm being wronged, but I also know I'm not out any money. I haven't lost my job. It's not going to affect my retirement. It's really not a high priority case, and I try to express that look, I get that this is not a priority, and the answer to that is always the same. No, you've been wronged here, and we're on the case. We're going to take care of you. Well, it's easy to say, but they don't actually do it. They talk a good game. But if they'd have just been honest with me and said, look, this is a low priority case, because I fucking asked them, is this just at the back of the line? Oh no, this is a really simple matter. It should only take, just a matter of getting the people to talk to each other. I'm just waiting for the green light, the assistant would say. So I'm sending him this information, doing what I can to be my own advocate. And among the things that I send him is the list of deficiencies that I found in the Carrier Academy from going through the manuals. Now, this is just my own personal experience at the Las Vegas Carrier Academy. Things may be different at other academies. I hope they're different at other academies. But I want to talk about right now some of the things that we're falling short in the Carrier Academy. So, here is my list of this. This is stuff that comes out of the administrator's guide. And these are things that are not being followed or enforced by the director of training here in Las Vegas. On page 5, it reads, quote, the recommended class size includes a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 12 learners. So there have been a number of times where I've had less than 4 students. In fact, at least one time I only had 1 student, and oh my God, it is the worst to just have one person. You're just sitting there talking to that one person the whole time. It's not a classroom. It's super awkward. And luckily the guy wound up being friendly and he had good stories and it went okay. But there's reasons why you need more than 1 student to make a classroom. And it actually talks about them in the manual. And so there were a number of times where we went below the minimum of 4 students. Page 7, recommended instructor, quote, recommended instructor trainee ratio of 1:6. So there it is in black and white, right there. Recommend 1:6, not going over 6 students per instructor. Also on page 7, quote, we recommend 1 EAS support/trainee per class, end quote. So this is where a supervisor should actually come in and sit in on the class. And they don't they're not there to instruct, but they're there to make sure that like the students' time cards get put in properly, and they're there to add flavor to the class, to add another perspective, to talk about management's perspective. And I've had supervisors sit in on the class a few times, and it really does add to the class. It's super helpful to have them in class. But this was almost never done. In the entire 6-7 years that I was teaching, maybe 10 times. And it was almost always the same supervisor, my one really good supervisor from the East Las Vegas post office. She was pretty much the only one who would ever actually come down and do that. So that was that one. Next on page 9, quote, "The course is designed to be interactive with an emphasis on actually performing tasks being demonstrated, so the learners will not be spending most of the classroom instruction seated," end quote. And this is one that I got pushback on from that dude who was my cohort in training, where he told me it was inappropriate to take field trips. But here, it says that you want to have actual interaction and don't just be seated all the time. And so, it's a bunch of bullshit. What I was doing was the right thing, and it says so right in the frickin' manual, and I'm getting pushback on it. So, there it is, right? That's another one. Hey, page 10, it says, I'm not going to bother with the quotation, but it says that the employees should get the EL 814 Employee's Guide to Safety. In all the years I taught, I never saw one of those. I don't know what one is. I'm not aware of any student ever being given a copy of EL 814 Employee's Guide to Safety. Does not exist as far as I could tell. So what's the deal? Print those out, give them to the students. Next, page 10, it says that there's a course evaluation form that the students are supposed to fill out. And we did those for a long time. And I got to tell you guys, I fucking crushed those evaluations. Dude, I would kill those evaluations. I would get such high scores. And so eventually they stopped doing them. And they just didn't do evaluations anymore. The rules didn't change. They just stopped doing it. Page 11 says that the carrier case, and it's got the case components, should have lights. None of our cases had working lights. And so we had these cases over in the corner of the room that were almost too dark to see the addresses, and it made it much harder for the students who were over in that section. Just didn't have lights for the cases. It also said we're supposed to have a 3M case in our classroom, and we did not have a 3M case in the classroom. It says that we're supposed to have an outgoing mail staging area. And we did not have one of those either. And noteworthy that right near our classroom was the collections department that would go pick up outgoing mail as the main part of their job. And they had an outgoing mail staging area, so I would take my students on field trips over to that area to show them the outgoing mail separations. And once again, it's inappropriate to take people on field trips. Is it? Because it fucking says right here that they should be seeing that stuff. Page 13 talks about the mock outdoor delivery course, and ours was in a state of disrepair. Half the mailboxes didn't have lids. They didn't have working flags. They'd be falling off their posts, and it was a mess out there. All right. Sorry, I dropped that for no good reason. On page 14, it said that we should have cluster boxes with a working lock and key. So we did have cluster boxes, but none of them had working keys. This is something that should be pretty easy to fix, but not interested. They were not interested. Page 15, it mentions the handbook EL 814 again, 2 more times, and again, I never saw any of those. Page 23, it says that you should support city letter carriers by providing additional training experiences. So there is no additional training for these letter carriers other than their 3 days of on-the-job instruction. And it's something that I rail about, that, we're supposed to have continued training, and it just doesn't happen. That's what this podcast is all about. Next, page 24, and here it is. Classroom instructors will need time to prepare classroom materials. And I never got this until my final week of teaching, when after 3 days I was fired. So this is what it reads on page 24. Quote, classroom instructors will need 2 hours of preparation time. For the first class, as much as 4 hours will be needed. Dude, there it is. Fucking black and white. 2 hours of prep time, and for the first class, as much as 4 hours. Well, for the first class, I got 2 hours, and I probably could have used a little more. For the next classes, I got 1 hour, so I was only getting half as much prep time as is called for in the manual, and then I only got it for 3 days because after the third day I got shit canned. And I'm the only classroom instructor who's pushy about this stuff, and the class has pretty much gone back to the status quo. So all of this is for nothing. You know, it was near as I could. Management got exactly what they wanted. So kudos to them. Again, on page 24, the necessity of prep time is mentioned again in this bullet point. And then on page 25, PS Form 2432 is supposed to be used to follow the training, and as far as I know, that is not being used. Oh, and page 26, again, it mentions that EAS support personnel should be in the classroom, and they're not. And then on page 26, it once again reiterates the maximum class size at 6:1. And then the last thing I want to mention on this is that the M document that created the Carrier Academy is M01879, and it says in there, there's these bullet points, and it says that the materials or the class is supposed to be updated annually or more frequently if needed. Well, I can tell you from teaching in the Carrier Academy that we have slides about MSPs and making sure you scan your barcodes while you're out on the street. Is that up to date? Fuck no, it's not. We have slides about the 1-bundle and 2-bundle and modified 2-bundle casing system, which I didn't even know what the fuck those were until we read that ancient parts of the contract where it talked about the rollout of DPS. And so we have stuff in there that dates to before DPS, because it turns out now we all use the vertical flat casing method. But that's still in the slides at the Carrier Academy. How to do the modified 2-bundle system. Why? Why is it in there? We had slides about numbered insured, the insured packages with the blue stickers on them. We don't have those anymore. The list goes on about all this stuff that was in this PowerPoint presentation and in the books that's all out of date. And it's supposed to be updated annually or more frequently as needed. The scanners, there's jack about the scanners that have all these new features. There's nothing in there about load truck. There's nothing in there about package look ahead. There's nothing in there about guys. It's ridiculous. And so when I'm going through all this stuff with the assistant in the business agent's office, you know, I mentioned this, like, hey, this shit is like way out of date. You guys are the ones who are supposed to be handling these issues at the Carrier Academy, so you should know about this. And he writes back, this was in August of last year. Oh yeah, I talked to Chris Jackson about that, and he's working on getting some new slides done, or, you know, working on getting it updated. Oh really? Because I just today, right before I started this podcast, I wanted to make sure I wasn't talking out of my ass. I texted 2 other Carrier Academy instructors and said, hey, are the slides up to date? Fuck no. No, they're not. So, where's the accountability? Oh yeah. I know where it is. So anyway, moving on. Then we go on to September of 2023. Now it's been July, August, 3 months that the business agent has had my case. And he tells me that the assistant, you know, that's the only person I'm dealing with. And to his credit, he's a good dude, you know, nice guy, just not doing anything. So he says, oh, Keisha's reviewing the documents that you sent me. And she, quote, Keisha is reviewing the documents you sent me, and she will meet with her counterpart at the area or designate it to someone, probably me. This is what's been said for months, is, I give the information to Keisha, and she has to either act on it or designate someone to act on it, which is going to be this guy who I've been talking to. And that's just the way it goes, month after month after month. Oh, yeah, the information's with Keisha. She just has to either act on it or tell me that I can act on it. And it just doesn't happen. So finally, at the end of September, I get frustrated and I press the issue. Look, is Keisha Lewis going to handle this issue or isn't she? Because with this alternative dispute resolution, this is my only avenue. This is the only place I can go for relief. I have to depend on my business agent. This is it. I come to them with my hat in my hand. And yeah, I know it's not an important case, but don't just keep shining me on and saying, oh yeah, we'll take care of it. I just need the green light and we're good to go and this should be real quick. Well, what the fuck? Where is it? So finally, look, is she going to handle it or not? Because if she doesn't give this green light, I'm just out of luck. That's it. And the business or the assistant who's helping me is like, yeah, I'll talk to her about it. And still gets nowhere with her. Now, I don't know what's going on at the business agent's office. I don't hear anything from Keisha Lewis herself. This is all secondhand from the assistant. But he tells me more than once that they've never had an issue like this before, and they've never dealt with the alternative dispute resolution process before, and so they don't really know what they're doing. And I think that, my own opinion, I think that's what the problem really was, is none of them knew what to do, and rather than ask and figure out, hey, how do we handle this, Keisha Lewis just sat on it. Oh, yeah, I need to figure out how to do that, and then just never did it. And oh, yeah, I need to figure out how to do that, and never did it. And that's just how it went. And then apparently there's so much dysfunction in that office that the assistant can't say, well, can I just handle it? Because that's what was supposed to happen for a long time, and it never happened. So finally, after I press this issue, he says, the assistant who's supposed to help me is like, forget it, I'm just going to go rogue. It's been too long. She's not letting me know one way or the other. So I'm just going to go rogue and press this issue myself and file the paperwork. So great, awesome. And it's just going to be another week. Cool. So I should have this all settled in another week. Well, again, that was the end of September. So that week goes by, and I send him a message. Hey, it's been a week. What's going on? And he decided not to go rogue. So we wait. We wait for Keisha Lewis to either handle it like she's supposed to or give the assistant the green light to handle it. And neither of those things happen. Oh, but by the end of next week, she's on at a training session now, and she should be back, and then it'll be handled by the end of next week. And the next week comes, no movement. So, I press again, and he says, well, this is again a quote from the email. The NBA left, and I texted her earlier. I am still in a holding pattern too, brother. I feel your pain. I did get the dispute form from City Delivery at headquarters, so it'll be ready to go if I get the green light or if she makes the decision to handle it herself. Now, mind you, this is fucking months after they've had this case. I think she will, returning to the quote, I think she will eventually assign it to me. I wanted to overstep my authority, but decided to give her the courtesy and ask her again. All I can ask is you continue to be patient. Fucking patient. That's what I've been this whole time. It's supposed to be this simple process. So, my reply. Quote, the NBA is specifically tasked with handling this dispute. She's had more than enough time to do so. Yet here we are, months later. Months. And still, we're just waiting to see if she feels like doing the job she's assigned to do. If I get the green light, brother, this light has been red for a long time. At this point, I have no reason to believe she will actually do her job. End quote. And you know what? Turns out she never would. Nope. She never did this alternative dispute resolution. Eventually, Eventually, the assistant got his instructions from wherever and was able to file this alternative dispute with management. And he got back to me. Hey, finally went rogue. Great. And he says, quote, the person that the area manager assigned to your issue asked for a little time to look into the issue since she's in California. In all fairness, I will give her a little time. We will be discussing next week. End quote. Would you like to guess what happened the next week? Go ahead, guess. If you said nothing, you win a prize. Fucking A, another self-imposed deadline from our union that they just don't meet. Nope, nothing fucking happened. So I wait, and now we get to mid-November, and finally, management just doesn't make a case, and so the assistant sends it up to DC. Management has never made an affirmative case of how my podcast violates the social media policy. And so finally, the assistant, who has been trying to help, sort of, just passes it on to DC. So now it goes to the director of City Delivery, Chris Jackson. And another month passes. And then another month passes. And I'm still just stuck thinking this is supposed to be, this alternative dispute resolution is supposed to be this streamlined process. All you have to do is get the adults in the room, talk to each other, work it out. But apparently that's too much to ask. So there was some communication with National, all of it initiated by me, and most of it coming through the regional assistant. So the regional assistant blows more smoke up my ass and says, oh, Chris Jackson saw your case and he's really upset about it and he's pissed off. And so after more action does not happen, I finally, fuck it, I'm going to call DC myself. So I can't find any contact information for Chris Jackson. His email's not out there, at least not where I can find it. There's no direct phone number to his office, so I just call the headquarters, like the switchboard, and ask him to put me through to Chris Jackson's office, and they do. And I call, and like the secretary or something answers the phone, and I briefly describe what my issue is, and of all the crazy things, she puts me through to Chris Jackson. And so I wait on hold for a few minutes, and that dude answers the phone. And I start telling him, what's going on, and then I'm just calling to get an update. And I already know, thanks to my regional assistant, that he's really pissed off about this, and he's fired up, and management has totally done you wrong. And once I finally slow down enough to give him a chance to talk, he has no idea what I'm talking about. Chris Jackson has never heard of this case and doesn't know anything about my Carrier Academy issue. And I believe he's telling me the truth. And to his credit, he says, I probably have somebody in my office who's working on it, and I'll have to find out who that is and have them get back with you. So I call the regional assistant. What the fuck? Why are you lying to me? Why are you blowing smoke up my ass? What is really going on here? And then that's when we finally get a call back from DC. And this guy in DC, who's an assistant in Chris Jackson's office, he's the person who's actually handling my case, and I'm able to actually get information from him. And he agrees. Yeah, I have a good case. Management has never made an affirmative case for why I got removed. And there's a couple of points to my case. Number one is, did I actually violate the social media policy? Is it a legitimate reason? And no, of course the answer to that is no, I didn't violate the social media policy. There's an additional issue here where the Carrier Academy is supposed to be a joint venture between union and management, and they make all personnel decisions together. Well, management made a unilateral decision to remove me from the academy, so is that valid? And of course the answer to that is no, it's not. But management doesn't take an affirmative stance on that either. They just don't take a position. They just say no. He's still out. And there's additional points as well, like, was I given due process? No, of course I wasn't given due process. They removed me first thing, and then did an investigative interview later, never found any wrongdoing, but I stayed removed. So we have all these cases, and I talked to the guy from Chris Jackson's office about those, and yeah, dude, this is slam dunk, no problem. All we have to do is meet with management. And that's been the problem all along, is just actually meeting with management. And so I asked the guy, how long do you think this should take? Is it a matter of weeks, months, years? What are we looking at here? And he said, oh yeah, it should just be a matter of a couple of weeks. And he actually scoffed at the idea that it might take longer than a few weeks to get this resolved. And guys, DC, district, the Washington, D.C., Chris Jackson's office, they would have my case for 5 months. Now, I know that when things go to arbitration, when things go up to D.C., they take a long time. And I got a call from my local union president. Back then, I think he was still the vice president, but regardless, he called me to essentially tell me that I was out of line to call up DC. I mentioned this briefly in another podcast, that I was out of line to call up there, and that I shouldn't be, trying to pressure them because I haven't really lost anything, and what's the big deal? And I agree with that. I haven't really lost anything, and I get it if my case is at the back of the line. And he tells me that when things go up like that, they could take years to settle. and that my timeline for this, expecting it to be resolved, is totally unrealistic. But what he doesn't realize is it's not my fucking timeline. It's the union's timeline that they're presenting. Oh yeah, this should only be a couple of weeks. Well, what do I know to contradict that timeline? I have no fucking idea how long this is supposed to take. I don't know whether I'm at the front of the line, the back of the line, what has to happen. I don't know any of that shit. So I go by what they tell me. And if they know better, my local union president told me this could take years. Is he telling me the truth? I guess, yeah, it could take years. But he doesn't know better than the people up at National. And when the guy at National tells me, oh, only a few weeks, that's what I think. Only a few weeks. Great, I'm going to be back in that academy. Lickety-split. 5 fucking months. 5 months. And during that 5 months, this is on top of all the time that it's already been delayed because the business agent wouldn't take her thumb out of her ass and either give the assistant the green light or do it herself. And so we just wait, and we wait. And I just keep getting smoke blown up my ass. Oh, yeah, Chris Jackson's out on travel right now, but when he gets back, the assistant will talk to him, and this should get squared right away. And fucking nothing. They just blow smoke and give excuses every time. It's just excuses. Oh, when I first went up there, it was getting close to Thanksgiving. Oh, well, everybody's out of town for Thanksgiving, so they couldn't possibly resolve it now. And then, oh, it's Christmas time. And you know how busy everything is at Christmas time. They can't possibly, meet right now. We're trying to meet. Management just won't meet. It's Christmas time, and people are real busy. And then, oh, Chris Jackson's traveling, and so I haven't had a chance to talk to him. But I'll talk to him as soon as he gets back. Yeah, sure you will. And, oh, well, Chris Jackson's at a conference, and I don't really have access to him. He's traveling. He's in the air right now, and I couldn't possibly get a hold of him. And then it became, oh, well, everybody's so busy up there working on the new contract that they don't have time to meet with management. Maybe all that shit's true. But again, I'm not the one who came up with this timeline. I'm not the one who said, oh, this should be a simple process and only take a few weeks. I don't care if I'm at the back of the line. That's where I think this case belongs, at the back of the line. I didn't lose any money. I didn't get my job threatened. I just got this position taken away. But then have the fucking balls to tell me I'm at the back of the line. Don't just keep blowing smoke up my ass and bullshitting me. So, I'm still trying to be proactive on my end. Now we're in January. We're in February. And I've been out for 7 months, 8 months, however long it's been. And I realize that there's this loophole that says that this has to be handled by Chris Jackson or his designee. And that's when it hits me. Oh my God. Who knows this case better than anybody else? Me. It doesn't say who the designee has to be. It just has to be his designee. I could be the designee. I'm totally motivated. I will fly my ass to D.C. for this hour-long meeting with management, be the designee, and get this shit hammered out. At least then I can get all my questions answered, and if it fails or succeeds, it's on me. So fuck it, let's do that, right? Obviously, my own union, not fucking interested in handling this case, so make me the designee. So I call up Washington, D.C. again. I get put through to the assistant in Chris Jackson's office, and that's what I tell him. Hey, I've had this great idea. Why don't you just name me the designee? And I start getting these excuses that, oh, well, it's been, we're working on this contract, and it's been the holidays, and yeah, dude, I get it. You're too busy. I'm not. I'll take the time off. I'll do whatever's needed. Just make me the designee. And he says that he'll talk to Chris Jackson about it and get back with me. Guys, guess when he got back with me? Go ahead, guess. If you said never, you are correct again. Yeah, blown off again. He could have told me to fuck off. He could have told me that, no, it's not appropriate to name you the designee. It has to be one of us, and so you're stuck with it and we get to it when we get to it. But he didn't. He didn't. Right? Why be honest with me? Just blow more smoke. That's great. And then that's when I get the call from my union president telling me that I can't call Washington, D.C. anymore, that I'm not to call Chris Jackson's office, that it is inappropriate for me to call up there to get him, find out about what's going on with my case. In the months that they had my case, I called twice. And the second time wasn't even for an update. It was actually to relieve them of the burden of having to deal with my case. And apparently that was too many. So yeah, I got instructed by my local union president that I'm not allowed to call DC anymore. What's funny about that is that a few days later, I called DC again, or maybe it was a week later, or whenever it was, I talked about this in my episode, The Beauty of the M Documents, where I wanted to see these committee reports that are talked about in the contract, that there's a committee on this and a committee on that, and where do I find these results? And I got put through to Chris Jackson's office. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't calling to be put through to that office, but I wound up getting put through to his office, and they asked what I'm calling about, and I apologized. Dude, I didn't know I was going to get put through to you. I'm really sorry. I called looking for this information, and this is just where they transferred me. I know I'm not supposed to call you. And here's the amazing thing. The next day, I got a call back from Chris Jackson. Chris Jackson himself called me back. And I apologized to him, and I said, dude, I know I'm not supposed to call. I'm really sorry. And he goes, no, that's crazy. Of course you can call us. We're your union. We're here for you. And yeah, it's totally fine to call up and find out what's going on. That's why we're here. We're here to serve the members. And that's where I got this idea in that episode that it's like there's two unions. There's these stand-up guys who want to do right and are there to serve the members. And then there's this other union where they're higher than us and better than us, and we're lucky they let us shine their boots. And in my own interaction, which is extremely limited, Chris Jackson is part of that first class of union reps where he's a stand-up dude. And what I've heard talked about him on Ada Arbitration confirms that he's a stand-up guy. He's all right. And it makes me wonder if my union president actually heard from Chris Jackson. Oh, I just got a call from Chris Jackson, and you better not be calling up there again. Did that really happen? Did Chris Jackson say that? Maybe it was the assistant in Chris Jackson's office, the one who kept shining me on. I think that's a lot more likely. Or who knows what happened. But Chris Jackson himself seemed like an A-OK dude. All right, so finally we fast forward to the end of the story. Monday, March 25th. I get a call out of the blue. Not expecting anything. Haven't heard anything from the union, of course. And it's the director of training here in Las Vegas saying, hey, I guess there's been some movement on your podcast case, and welcome back. I'm going to put you back on the schedule at the Carrier Academy. Oh, really? Fucking great. How about that? It's all settled. Didn't hear anything from the union. I don't know why they'd call me with information like that. Right? Fuck. Why would they do that? So yeah, I hear it from management. Hey, it looks like we're putting you back on the schedule. So we start talking about what my availability is. I actually have some vacation coming up, and so I'm not going to be available a lot right when he wants to put me in. And so actually even now, which today is April 14th as I record this? Yeah, April 14th. I still haven't actually taught yet in the Carrier Academy, but I am officially reinstated. So how about that? Ain't that some shit? So then I contact my representative at the National Business Agent's office, the regional assistant, and say, hey, good news. Apparently I'm back. So, what's the story? What happened? And there's no story. Yeah, they must have said to put you back. What do you mean they must have said put you back? Like, what happened? And there's no anything. It's so unsatisfying. And so what happened at this meeting? Like, what did the union say? What did management say? Did management ever make an affirmative argument? No fucking idea. No idea. And I can't call the dude who was assigned my case at Chris Jackson's office because fuck me. And so I have all these questions. Like, well, what did they say about my podcast? Like, did they acknowledge that it doesn't violate the social media policy? I don't know. Probably. He says, I presume that they decided your podcast is okay. Oh, well, awesome. I'll be sure to cite that if it ever comes up again. Well, the regional assistant presumes that it's okay. And this isn't on him, right? Again, the regional assistant has been a stand-up dude. His hands have been tied, and he's doing what he can to help me. But it ain't helpful. And so when I'm talking to my director of training here, he asked me, well, what did they say about your podcast? And my answer was, they didn't tell me to take it down. I guess there's no problem with it. Because I can't tell them they said it was okay, because they didn't. Or if they did, nobody passed that on to me. And so what I'm waiting for is to get the actual written document that says I'm going to be reinstated and talks about what they talked about, whatever this resolution is. And according to the regional assistant, there is no written document. There is no anything. It's just somebody called somebody else and said, hey, put him back in. And that's it. I got nothing to hang my hat on. I got no evidence. I got no resolution. All I got was, I guess you're back in the academy. So tomorrow, if I go to teach and they say, well, your podcast violates the social media policy, you can't teach, what's my response? I got nothing saying otherwise. If they tell me, well, we don't need you anymore, so we're just going to remove you and make this unilateral decision on their personnel, that was one of the pillars of the union's argument. Did that hold? Did management say, yeah, we can't make unilateral personnel decisions? No fucking idea. There's nothing in writing. So this is the oddly unsatisfying conclusion of my Carrier Academy saga. Oh, and then who's my accuser? Who actually said that my podcast violates the social media policy? Never got revealed. But it did actually get revealed at one point by my local union president, which he was telling me how I'm a pain in the ass and that I need to just keep my head down and hey, now that you're back in the Carrier Academy, don't be making waves in there. You got to just keep your head down and do whatever they tell you to do. And that's the reason you got removed in the first place. And he was just open about it. That, yeah, of course it was retaliation. You're a pain in the ass. Why would they want to deal with somebody like you who's going to expect them to abide by the manuals? That was legit. That's what I was told. Why would they want to deal with that? And I said, well, it's in the manuals. Like, that's what the manuals are for. He said, well, again, why would management want that headache? And I said, okay, well, so what happens when they go to schedule me and they don't give me the prep period? How do you want me to handle it? And his answer was, again, why would they give those hours to you when they have instructors who are willing to essentially just eat it and come in and get the classroom set up off the clock or just have a substandard classroom? And his analogy was, think of it like the carriers we have carriers who are runners. And yeah, maybe they're not doing everything by the book, but they get the job done fast. And so management decides to use those carriers. This is essentially the same thing. And I go, yeah, dude, that's why we have equitability grievances at the end of the quarter, because it's not right. And he's, oh, well, we're kind of mixing apples and oranges here. No, we're fucking not. We have this contract for a reason. This is how we hold management accountable. This is how we get the best possible shake for our fellow carriers. And if we're not here to enforce that and to try to do the best we can for each other, then what the fuck are we doing here? What are we doing? If the manual says that, oh, you're supposed to have these materials and management doesn't provide the materials, and then the union's like, they can provide the materials or not, however they see fit. Then what the fuck is the union doing? Why do we bother? Well, for me, as a union steward, that ain't my style. If that's what it says in the manuals, if that's what it says in the contract, then that's what we're going to fucking do. We're going to do the best we can for each other. We're going to fight for each other. We're going to fight for the best possible circumstances. And that's the kind of union that I want to be a part of. And it sounds like, from listening to 8 Arbitration and seeing what's going on social media, that other people feel that way too. That they want a union who's going to fight for them. So, that's one of my takeaways from all of this, is I don't want people to blow smoke up my ass. I want people who are going to tell me the truth and people who are going to fight. You can't fight every battle. And so you got to be honest with people and say, look, I got this, and this, and you're at the back of the line, and I hope I can get to you. And at least it's better than fucking lying to them and blowing smoke up their ass. That's the way I feel about it. All right, so we're over an hour and a half here. Let me wrap this up. Here's the great irony in this whole situation, is how passionate I've become about the union and about learning the contract and about being the best steward that I can be. You know, every day at my station, management gives their stand-up talk in the morning, and I give a stand-up talk in the morning. And I talk about what it says in the contract, and I talk about people's rights. And my mission with this podcast of making you discipline-proof, it's the same mission I have in the station. And I tell carriers about ways that they make themselves discipline-proof. I tell them that you don't get in trouble for taking a long time to deliver your route. This whole thing that management tells you about, oh, you got to hustle out there and you better make it back by 5 o'clock. That's not true. You don't have to make it back by 5 o'clock. You get back whenever you get back. Your obligation is to fill out that $39.96 and to give an honest estimate for how long it's going to take. And carriers, in all the time I've been a steward, which is not long, but it's been, at least a year, I've never had to defend a carrier for moving too slow. I've had to defend carriers for unauthorized overtime because they didn't inform management. But I've never had to defend a carrier for taking 9.3 hours when management thought it should only take 9. That's never been a discipline letter. And so, anyway, I sidetracked myself again. I've become really passionate about this and about defending my fellow carriers for, what other people, stewards might see as lost causes. And no, I'll take that case. I'll fight for that. I'll figure something out. I'm going through that right now with a carrier who calls out sick a lot. He's been with the post office for a while. He has no sick leave saved up, and he calls out sick a lot. And he's up to this last discipline letter that got issued to him, this 14-day suspension, which is just short of being fired. And I'm looking at it, and at first blush, dude, the guy calls out a lot, and he's already been warned. He's already had a 7-day suspension. This is the next logical step. I don't know what I have to go off of here. But the more I look at it, I see, okay, this absence, his kid was sick, and he has a doctor's note for his kid that says the kid was sick. So does management think that's an illegitimate absence? And on this other one, he was sick, and he has a doctor's note that says he was sick. And there's instance after instance after instance where he's documented his illness. And I start thinking about it. I'm like, well, he's not even on restricted sick leave, so he doesn't have to provide the documentation. But wait a minute, what's the documentation for anyway? Why do we even do documentation? What does that tell management? And I intend to ask that when I interview management about this discipline. I'm going to ask them that. What's the point of providing documentation? What does that do? And I expect that the answer is going to be that it legitimizes the absence, that it lets us know that, yeah, you're out for an actual reason, that you're not just like faking it or abusing your sick leave. Okay, well, if that's the case, then if somebody is actually sick, is that a legitimate use of sick leave? And their answer has to be yes, of course. That's what sick leave is for. Okay, well, if a person's family member, close family member, is legitimately sick, is that a legitimate reason to use sick leave? Well, yeah, that's the point of sick leave. Okay, well, then we have all these absences, but they're all documented. They're all legitimate reasons. And I'll tell you what, guys, when I first saw this discipline, I went from thinking, well, there's nothing I can do. And other stewards told me, yeah, there's really nothing you can do here. The guy's absent all the time. He knows the score, and he's got to take his lumps. It goes from that to me thinking, well, maybe I can get this knocked down to like a 7-day, or maybe we can just not progress the discipline any further, to now I'm for real thinking, I think this discipline should be rescinded completely, because these are legitimate absences, and that's the fucking point of providing that documentation. So that's what I'm passionate about now, and that's what I want to be spending my time doing. And to get back to where I was going with it, the great irony of it is I don't want to be gone all week at the Carrier Academy, because who's going to look out for my brothers and sisters at my station? Who's going to give those morning stand-up talks? Who's going to fight that discipline? Who's going to fight for them and make sure that they're defended? That's what I want to be doing with my time. And I may not teach in the Carrier Academy again. What I really wanted was to win my case and for management to say that, okay, your podcast is fine. It doesn't violate any rules. And man, ain't it a motherfucker that I won my case and didn't get that. It's wild. What a crazy union we have. So anyway, that's my story. And thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for waiting for it. If there's any further developments, I'll let you know. Who knows what those might be. But that's the story about the time I got fired from the Carrier Academy. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate your support. I appreciate the downloads. I love getting the emails from you. Again, classesofmail@gmail.com. And I will catch you next time.